The filibuster is expected to come into play for extended periods this week when the infighting gets tougher over the lid law and its companion measures in the state Senate. Will also be a test of iron pitting the Alabama Education Association against the Alabama Farm Bureau Federation. AEA says the property tax relief measures will cost the Special Education Trust Fund money. Farm Bureau says without a lid law, property taxes will skyrocket. The proposed legislation calls for a constitutional amendment. It would limit to 20% the amount of increased ad valorem tax revenue any county could collect as a result of the current statewide property reappraisals. Senator U.W. Clement of Birmingham, who is the chairman of the Senate Rules Committee, predicted today that the lid bill will be called up out of order tomorrow when the Senate reconvenes, and a new priority special order calendar is presented to the upper chamber. Lieutenant Governor Jerry Beasley has said he will do everything in his power to see that the lid bill is passed, and he predicts it will win approval in the Senate by a wide margin.
I just sort of counted heads, and I feel like there'll probably be 29 to 30 senators that would vote for the bill, and probably right now it's more evenly split because a lot of people would like to avoid voting at all, would like to just let it die, and then they could say they were for the bill and never have to go on record. But I'm going to do everything within my power to see that the bill is voted on. And, of course, it's up to those who support the bill to see if they get the votes. But I feel that it has to pass in this session, and I think it would be a mistake not to pass it.
Another influencing factor to get property tax relief legislation passed and sent to the voters for approval is a threat by Governor George Wallace to call a special session of the legislature if it fails in the current session. Some legal minds say there are still some uncertainties in the property tax bills, raising constitutional questions that could be tested in the courts. They claim counties with low property sales would be penalized under the equalization provisions. The property tax bills will consume many of the remaining days in the session because of extended debate. The Senate still has a great deal of major legislation to consider before the middle of next month. The upper chamber is yet to consider the general fund budget, which is expected to be amended drastically in the Senate. The education budget of $1.6 billion must still be debated in the House before the Senate becomes entangled in that. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News. Both houses of the Alabama legislature put the hammer down today and went to work passing legislation. The Senate working from a special order calendar, while the House dealt with mainly uncontested local bills. A backlog of legislation has confronted both houses. The lower chamber passed a bill to propose floating an $18 million bond issue to construct a new highway department headquarters. It ignored the education budget for another day and avoided a dispute over the amended controversial lid bill. The Senate added amendments to the bill and sent it back to the House. One sets up a new formula for the redistribution of federal money, which the state's general fund now receives from the Tennessee Valley Authority. There is resentment in the House over the amendment, which the Senate says must be included for the lid bill to pass.
Of course, the Senate, in its wisdom, has never seen fit to adopt this bill before. And this time, rather than adopting the bill that we're dealing with ad valorem tax, they attach a number of amendments, particularly the Tennessee Valley Amendment, which, let me say, we all have sympathy for the Tennessee Valley area and their problem. But the question is whether it should be attached to this bill. There's a feeling among many members of the House and the public, I think, that this is done, in effect, to kill the bill again. And, of course, this would be a good approach. And we don't want to mislead the public in Alabama in the House on that they will gain some relief when, in effect, there's a good possibility that they won't. This reminds me some of the utility bills, because we would not have the soaring utility rates today if the Senate had adopted the utility bills in 1975.
The bill that came out of the Senate with the TVA amendment on it is very similar to what the House sent to the Senate. And the TVA amendment does not affect any county outside the TVA territory. And I don't see why anybody would oppose it. All this does is correct an obvious deficiency that's existed for a number of years. The TVA counties have sent the money to the state of Alabama to the general fund for years, when in fact the money should have been left in the counties for the use of the local governments. This is money paid to the state in lieu of taxes. So I really don't see how anybody could object to this. In fact, this will help the lid law pass, in my judgment, because it brings into the picture an area of the state that probably would have voted against the lid law.
Now, what will the TVA amendment do to the general fund budget?
First of all, this year would have no effect. Next year it would have a certain percentage, and then it would continue until it built up over a period of about 8 years to 80% of the amount that now is paid to the state. And of course, this would have some effect in those years on the general fund. The total amount paid to the state now by the counties would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million. So this would be spread out over a period of 8 years, 80% of that. And really all you're doing is returning to those counties the money that is rightfully theirs. It would have no effect on the rest of the state and little effect on the general fund over those years because the growth would absorb that. And I think that we're going to have to correct the general fund anyway at some point in time.
But it does not put the fund in jeopardy.
Not at this time. In fact, it would have no effect this year at all. No effect on this year's budget, nor really on next year's budget.
Governor Wallace added his endorsement to the TVA amendment, saying it is loaded with fairness to the 16 North Alabama counties served by TVA. He pointed out that Alabama Power pays taxes to the counties and cities where its facilities are located. The Senate passed a bill setting the minimum salary for sheriffs at $22,500 annually, and one other measure would designate and appoint supernumerary sheriffs. From the state legislature, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News. It took the state Senate about 35 minutes to change the status of Senator Wallace Miller of Enterprise to Dr. Miller, and E.C. Crum Foshee of Red Level to Senator Foshee again. Lieutenant Governor Jerry Beasley described the posture of the Senate as that of a mother picking one of two children, and the Senate was dealing with two very fine men. Before a vote of 29-0 to change the makeup of the state Senate, Senator Wallace Miller read a prepared statement.
May I say, gentlemen, that this issue is not to be treated lightly, for we're not discussing just my rights as a public servant, but the rights of some 100,000 people in Covington, Geneva, and Coffee County. So I asked all of you to make a careful review of this situation before you make up your minds or attempt to make a judgment concerning the settlement of this matter.
The statute which returned E.C. Crum Foshee to the Senate was put in resolution form by Senator U.W. Clemon and was read by the Senate clerk.
Of the Senate of Alabama adhere to Title 3692, Code of Alabama 1975, relative to seat for Senate District 25. The said statute provides, when any person holding any office or place under the authority of this state is sentenced by any court of the United States of this state or any other state to imprisonment in a penitentiary or hard labor from the county, his office or place shall be vacated from the time of the sentence. If the judgment is reversed, he shall be restored to office. But if pardoned, he shall not be restored to office.
That resolution was amended after Senator John Baker of Russellville reminded his colleagues they were trying to spare personalities. Baker's substitute, stating that Foshee be restored to the Senate in place of Wallace Miller, was the one adopted by the upper chamber.
Mr. Adams, Mr. Baker, Mr. Bank, Mr. Clemon, Mr. Edwards, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Fine.
Handshakes followed the final vote by the Senate, and Dr. Miller greeted the man whom he called his senator.
I got to say something. You my senator now, and I'm going to be calling on you.
Foshee did not comment immediately after becoming senator again, but did have something to say a little later.
President, I don't know what all to say to this body and to Dr. Miller, but I would say that I hope I can continue the good job that he was doing, and to say to him that, as I have before, in fact, as he said in the bathroom this morning, we met, and that he is my friend and he will be my friend, and if I can carry on some of the things that he started, I'll certainly be glad to do so, and I hope I can do a good job for the 25th District for whatever time I'm here. Thank you.
In its regular order of business today, the Senate passed and sent to the House a bill giving job security to non-teaching school employees after 1 year's probation. The filibuster on property tax legislation was the next target of business, while the House tackled the more than $1 billion education budget. From the state legislature, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
According to Ethics Committee documents turned over to the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, H. Ray Cox, a former Gadsden banker, has told investigators that between 1968 and 1970, he gave payoffs to Assistant State Treasurer John A. Bearfield to keep state deposits in his bank in Gadsden, Alabama. Cox told investigators that payoffs were made in cash, interest-free bank loans, and bank stock in exchange for deposits of state funds in the Alabama City Bank of Gadsden, where Cox was president. The interviews were conducted by Ethics Commission investigators last fall at the federal prison camp at Maxwell Air Force Base, where Cox is serving a term for federal bank fraud. Ethics Commission documents show that Cox told investigators he paid Assistant State Treasurer John Bearfield $500 a month in cash. He said the cash was carried in unmarked envelopes. Cox told probers that Bearfield charged him $250 a month for each $1 million in state deposits held by his bank. Cox said he delivered the money to Bearfield once a month to a Birmingham hotel lounge. Ethics documents now turned over to the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office show that Cox said he became nervous of the system of paying cash to Bearfield and substituted a $75,000 interest-free loan to Bearfield. Cox said interest on the loan amounted to $500 a month. Cox said that was used as a payoff instead of cash. Ethics documents we've seen show that Cox told investigators that the alleged payoffs were made in Birmingham, and he told them this during their 3 visits to Cox at the Maxwell Federal Prison Camp. Former banker Cox also said Bearfield told him if he was late with payments, state funds would be immediately withdrawn from his Alabama City Bank of Gadsden, where Cox was president. Cox explained to ethics officials that alleged kickback funds were raised through 2 dummy real estate firms set up by the Gadsden Bank. Cox said fees charged to customers using real estate as collateral for loans was put into the dummy accounts. Cox also said Bearfield accepted bank stock in return for state deposits, and that Bearfield also allegedly accepted advanced stock information on banks with state funds on deposit. Cox told state ethics probers he first learned of alleged state treasury kickback schemes at a banking convention when he asked fellow bankers how to secure state deposits. Cox said it was common knowledge among Alabama's banking community that Bearfield was allegedly accepting payoff in return for state deposits. We've been told by unimpeachable sources that the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office received the Bearfield ethics report at the same time that office received the Melba Till Allen case. WSFA TV News has also learned that Melvin Cooper, the head of the Ethics Commission, has been notified that he will be recalled to testify before the grand jury when it takes up the Bearfield case. So far, the jury has not gotten to that case because it continues to investigate the financial dealings of State Treasurer Melba Till Allen. That jury reconvenes in the Allen case Monday morning. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
What's been on my mind these past 2 or 3 weeks about Good Friday has to do with a representation by our Lord on the cross where his life is brought into sharpest focus of those 2 elements, those 2 areas of our life that we frequently try to put in contrast with each other, but which are 2 sides of the same thing. And that is faith and works. You and I, as individuals and sometimes corporately, are called upon to face across crosses. And we look to our example, Jesus the Christ, the Son of God. His example is faith. Blessed Savior, who at this hour didst hang upon the cross, stretching forth thy loving arms, grant that all mankind shall look unto thee and be saved. Amen.
Three unrelated shooting incidents have kept Montgomery Police Department officials busy today. Shortly after 12 noon, patrolmen were summoned to the corner of Jeff Davis and Hill Streets, where James Williams was found in his car suffering from a gunshot wound. According to police reports, the incident occurred at the home of Leonard Stone at 2362 Winford Street in West Montgomery. Allegedly, the two men were arguing when Stone is believed to have shot Williams in the upper part of the chest with a .22 caliber rifle. Williams is in critical condition at Jackson Hospital. Minutes after the incident, a second call for police in front of the Elks Club on Cleveland Avenue was made. According to reports, two black males were arguing in front of the club when one of the men was shot in the leg by a .38 caliber pistol. The victim was rushed to Jackson Hospital and treated. The third shooting took place on May Street, where it is believed that a domestic quarrel was the cause for a woman being shot in the head. The identities of the victims in these shootings is being withheld by police detectives pending further investigation. In West Montgomery, this is Emery Stapleton, WSFA TV News, reporting.
David is a fine ball player, an excellent shooter. He was second leading scorer in the city. He's the first team, all-city team at Miami, and kid averaged 24.5 points a ball game. And I think he's really just coming into his own. I think he's going to be a much better college ball player than he was high school ball player because he's just developing. Another kid from Miami, 6'6", forward Charlie Walker, who averaged 23.5 points from Curley High School, which is a Catholic school at Miami. And Charlie, I think, is going to be a super ball player. Kid's about 200, 215. He's strong, and he's still growing. Kid's a good student, too, and I think these two kids are going to be real good forwards, prospect for us next year because I think they got the ability to come in and play right away. Also, we're signing a guard from Miami, Sims. Kid's Riley Sims from North Miami Beach, excellent shooter. Riley averaged about 20 points a ball game, 6'2" guard, very good outside shooter. He's quick. I think he's going to be a good defensive ball player, and he handles the ball well. These three kids, I think, are going to be a very good asset to our program.
Do you anticipate getting any of the scholarship players off of Coach Floyd Lazier's team?
Well, we've talked with a couple of ball players, one in particular, Forston, I think, who has a very good attitude. He expressed that to me just today, and I sit and talk with him about an hour, and he feels that he does have some type of future in basketball beyond the college level, and he really wants to play, and he's willing to do the things that we want him to do, and which is necessary in my system. And I think he is the only guy right now that I can say that may be on this ball club next year. Haven't talked with the other kids. A couple of kids have talked to Dr. Frederick, but they have to talk to me, if they want to play basketball, because I'll be doing the coaching.
Credit. You can't see it, you can't touch it, nor can you smell it. But credit is something millions of Americans strive to achieve, and more importantly, strive to retain. This was never more evident than the past Christmas shopping season, which most persons are still paying for. This is what some people call the demon of the credit business. It's the Credit Bureau of Montgomery. And it's this place which thousands of merchants and bankers call each day to check on a person's credit rating, which is stored in a vast computer network located in Chicago. There are about 10,000 credit bureaus around the United States, each capable of communicating with the others. One of the most common misunderstandings about credit bureaus is that your credit application is either accepted or denied here. Actually, that decision is left up to the potential credit grantor, but that decision is usually greatly influenced by the information in your file. John Holloway Jr. is a partner in the Credit Bureau of Montgomery. He explains what sort of things can hurt an individual's rating.
Probably the worst thing a person can do as far as a credit rating is file bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a stigma that remains on a person's credit record for 14 years. Other derogatory items or adverse items stay on a person's credit record for 7 years. The way a person can, if a person just has slowness in his payment record, this can be overcome by simply bringing the record up to date, or bringing the account up to date and paying it on time each time a payment's due.
It used to be that a person could not know what information was in his or her credit file, but now the Fair Credit Reporting Act requires that a person who is denied credit must, number one, know why it was refused, and number two, be allowed to review the credit file.
Anyone can come by the Credit Bureau and see their file. If they've been turned down within the last 30 days, there's no charge to show them their file. However, if they have not been turned down and just want to come by the Credit Bureau and see what's on there, there is a reasonable charge for this service.
If somebody does see their file and sees an error there, what can they do about that? How do they go about changing that error?
If they see an account that is disputed, say a merchant has turned in an account that they say is not correct, we go back and we recheck with that merchant and verify that account. If the merchant said that it is an account that there's no dispute on, and in other words, it's a legitimate account, then we tell the individual that it is a legitimate account. If he still disputes that account, then he has he can place a letter in the file, which is read each time an inquiry comes in.
Even more recently, the government implemented the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, providing credit possibilities to anyone, regardless of sex or marital status.
This allows, when a person opens up, say a man and wife open up a charge account, on each application, it shows that they'd ask whether they want it in a joint, whether they want to be jointly responsible, whether they want to be individually responsible for the account. If in the case where they want to be jointly responsible, their credit record is shown both as husband and wife, and then in case of a divorce or in case that she applies individually, then this joint information would be shown on her record. And virtually there's two separate records in file. There's one on him and then one on her.
Another group of persons still somewhat discriminated against are the young graduates, just out on their own for the first time. But Holloway has some advice for them.
The best thing that a newcomer into the credit field should do would be come by the Credit Bureau and let us establish a file on him, showing where he graduated from college or high school, or where he's employed, where his wife is employed. Let us just establish the information, establish a file on him. And chances are he may have some credit. He may have some credit with a drugstore or someone he's known a long time. Then he can go to the merchants or go to some of the merchants he may know and ask for limited credit.
Outstanding consumer credit is quickly approaching the $200 billion mark, the most money owed on automobiles and personal loans. And with celluloid replacing paper for most shoppers, that figure's bound to be surpassed in the near future. Therefore, it's very likely Credit Bureau employees such as these will have plenty to keep them busy. This is Dave Rickey reporting for Composite.
I don't know, I just fell into it. I was at rodeo in Buffalo, Minnesota one year, up there trying to contest, trying to ride bull bareback horses. It looked like I was putting on a clown act every time I got on one, so I said, well, shoot, the clown didn't show up. And I said, well, I can do that. I've been a clown all my life. I got in the wooden pickle barrel. I've been a clown ever since. I've never worked an amateur rodeo, never clowned an amateur rodeo. It's always been professional. I've been the luckiest guy in the world. And I've acquired a few acts that, like this car act. That's probably been the biggest asset to my clowning ever. Without it, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in a lot of places that I go. raised in West Texas where, you know, a lot of cowboys, it's their way of life. And a lot of little rodeos. And I don't know, I just always fascinated with what the clowns did. And had always had a desire to be a clown. I was always a class clown in school. And always the one that made people laugh and one that the teacher sent out of class for doing it to the other kids. I don't know, if you really want to know why I do it, it's the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd.
But the life of the professional rodeo clown is not all laughs. It's a lot of hard work and preparation, not to mention traveling thousands of miles in between towns scattered across the United States and Canada. And it's hours of putting on the intricate makeup which hides many of the battle scars of close encounters in the dirt-floored arenas. Quail Dobbs is a veteran of more than a decade of this game of making rodeo fans laugh, and he's rightfully proud of the big-eyed face that millions have come to know.
A lot of clowns look alike. You can't tell them, you know, apart. Especially rodeo clowns. Circus clowns are not that way because they patent their face, and you can't anybody have the same makeup that they do. We're not that sophisticated rodeo clowns, or not. We should be, because we have a good profession, I think.
But there's a more serious side to his trade, getting in there and mixing it up with the big bucking bulls. Something he says is appreciated by the cowboys who are lashed to the backs of those massive hulking animals.
Bullfighter his job is to protect the rider and help him out that way, and he can do a lot of good. And I think you'll see, if you interview 10 bull riders, 9 of them will mention the clown, and that he plays a vital role in his event. Bullfighter has a very definite position, that is to divert the attention of the bull away from the rider if and when he gets off. After the 8 seconds, even if he does ride the bull, he's still got to get off of it. And it's the bullfighter's job to move in and take the bull away from his hand, that is riding hand, so he can get off into his hand. It's not apt to hang up. Now, barrel man, which I'm doing here at Montgomery, is solely for the amusement of the audience, really. For some reason, people like to see somebody jump in a barrel, and then they like to see a bull hit it. And that's what it's all about, I guess.
But is it all worth it? What does Quail Dobbs get back for the chances he takes and the hours he works just to get a laugh from the millions of people who see his act each year?
You know, you get paid, and I make a living at this, but it's not the reason I do it. It's really rewarding to have the kids come by, you know, and golly, the adults too, you know, they'll come by and say, hey, sure enjoyed your act. You know, that's really rewarding.
I jump over cars while being towed by a truck, and I'm on a pair of roller skates.
All right, why roller skates?
Well, I'm no good driving a motorcycle, so it has to be skates. I've been skating all my life.
What kind of speed do you get up to when you're approaching a ramp to jump like this?
Well, this is something I don't tell because I was the only one doing it, and I had to find out what speed I had to go. So if anybody else wants to do it, they have to find out too. I don't tell that secret.
Well, being the only one doing this, and you hold the record for jumping on skates, what is your current status on that?
4 cars. And I plan jumping 10. 10's my goal. If I make 10 and I'm still got good bones, I'll quit.
What kind of euphoric feeling do you have floating out there with nothing under you but the few wheels on roller skates?
Well, I've gotten several pictures, and every one of them, my mouth's wide open. I don't even see the cars when I'm going over them, unless I hit them.
Have you hit them?
Yes, I've hit cars 3 times. 3 times out of 30 jumps.
You can walk away from that kind of situation?
I've walked away from every one of them, yes.
Is this something you practice?
No.
The Alabama House refused this week to accept the amended property tax lid bill from the Senate in the amended form, but is expected to wrestle with the issue come next Tuesday. The bill, as amended in the Senate, sets up a new formula for the redistribution of money paid to the state by the Tennessee Valley Authority in lieu of taxes. The money now goes to the state's general fund, but 16 North Alabama counties served by TVA, so they want the money for themselves. They'll be satisfied with 20% of the $20 million for the first year under the new proposed formula. The Senate has warned the House that without the TVA amendment to the lid bill, there is little or no hope of it being ratified in the upper chamber. The House, on the other hand, and especially the bill's sponsor, Representative Rick Manley of Demopolis, says the amendment raises constitutional questions and may not agree to concur in the Senate amendment. The fireworks should begin on Tuesday if the House decides to do something about the House-passed bill. The bill is expected to be sent to conference committee, and even then, it may not iron out the differences. Besides property tax legislation, there are a number of other matters still unresolved in the state legislature. Retired teachers and other state employees want some definite word on a cost of living increase. A 7.5% state employees raise needs final approval. The House has passed the general fund budget, and it's waiting for the Senate to act on it. Education doesn't have an approved budget. The House is still arguing that measure, and then it will be the Senate's turn. Both houses are now meeting 3 days a week instead of the usual 2. They're making up for lost time and seeking to give those who work behind the scenes, commonly known as the workhorses, a week in April to do necessary paperwork before the 78th session ends on April the 24th. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Work my legs off and run ahead. Go ahead. They know, Blake. Let's go, man. We gotta go.
Complete lines communication for studies and also for high family to ensure a warm, hot summer. Yeah. In their pocketbook, these kids are used to this. I don't think that they were actually
Right. The state's education budget could be the first order of business on the calendar when the House reconvenes this afternoon at 2 o'clock. The upper chamber was amending the more than $1 billion budget when it last conducted a special order of business. The lawmakers may be anxious to move the budget to the Senate and get on with adjusting to the amended lid bill on property taxes. The House is not happy with the way that bill came back from the Senate in amended form last week. An amendment sets out a formula for distributing money the Tennessee Valley Authority now sends to the state's general fund. 16 North Alabama counties want 20% of the $20 million for their county and city governments, and the state Senate and Governor George Wallace feel they should get the money and more over the next several years. House members claim the amendment should not be a part of the lid bill, but handled separately in a bill by itself, and there's such legislation now pending in the House. The Senate also convenes in about 2 hours. It will eventually face a decision on a $200 million bond issue for school construction, but it's not the same issue that has recently passed the House. The general fund budget should get out of the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee this week and then be debated by the Senate. That budget passed the House several weeks ago. Both houses are now on a 3-day work week and will be for this week and next week. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News. Dr. Porter said the blast occurred in the Republic of China on March the 14th. Such an occurrence, he says, immediately necessitates a stepped-up procedure here at the Office of Radiation Programs. Data from EPA's air monitoring network indicate measurable radiation fallout in 11 states.
As it came from Anchorage on the 20th, it came down across the United States, and the first stations that it was actually detected was in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Helena, Montana, and Denver, Colorado. And then, as you can see, all the rest of the stations that were actually sampled were all background. As it proceeded across the United States on the 22nd, the weather conditions were right to where you can see more positive results as it traversed the country. Whereas on the 21st, the values were around 30 picocuries per cubic meter. On Cheyenne and Denver, they were 85 picocuries on the second day.
Are those what you consider dangerous levels?
No, I certainly wouldn't say that. On the 23rd, it's now extending all the way across the United States. For example, South Carolina has 29. Montgomery yesterday was 15. The value today is 45. Jackson, Mississippi was 29 yesterday, and the value today I think is 15. So you can see these are dropping as it passes on, that goes on across the United States.
How long do you think it might take to completely move out of the United States? I guess it goes out into the Atlantic.
Yes, it would. George, I actually think that it would, by the first part of next week, most of the activity has already traversed the company, across the country on the first pass. But, as you know from past experience that we've had, in about another 7 to 11 days, it will actually go around the atmosphere again, and there is a possibility we would be exposed again the second time, as long as it stays in this area.
Wyoming and Colorado continue to report the highest levels, although the agency says radiation levels in these states have decreased significantly since Thursday. Based on levels of fallout found in rainwater, Colorado has advised residents to refrain from drinking rainwater for the next several days. Colorado has recommended that dairy cows be fed stored feeds and not be allowed to graze.
Since the deposition of the fallout falls upon the surface of the ground, it also contaminates pasture grass and crops. And as the best indicator, since milk is a very major food to man and to children, as the cattle, dairy cattle, consume the foliage outside and feed that they would consume, they obviously pick up the contaminated grass. And the cow actually, in essence, concentrates the radioactive material for us in the milk. It's a very good indicator, so that's why we pick milk more than any other type of environmental media to be able to determine what levels that the food chain is actually being contaminated.
The first milk samples have begun arriving in Montgomery. Results from these samples will be known early next week. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News, Montgomery.
Larry Nelson. It's just the hardest golf course in the world to try to sit there and hold a lead on. And I told my caddy, I said, if I can just get in the clubhouse at 5 under, quick, then I'll sit on it. That'll be a great score. And I got lucky, made a couple more birdies. So I was just had some very fortunate breaks.